really quick before we get too far away from the Comedy Store, you actually supported the strike when they weren't paying the comedians. What was that? What was that like? The environment of like being there during that time is something that they now talk about in documentaries, and you're like, nah, that was my life. I was there. So
what happened every time I'd come back off the road, I would go to the Comedy Store, and keep working on new material for the Tonight Show, for all the other shows I was doing. So as soon as I'd come out touring with Sammy Davis or whoever I was touring with, as soon as I came off, I'd call the Comedy Store and call in for times. And whenever you went to the Comedy Store, you went to the original room, what they called it, the original room, about 118 people in that room. And you sat. Now, in the meantime, Mitchie had bought another section of that building out. That place used to be Ciro's, a very famous place in Hollywood many years ago. But now a guy named Art LeBeau was running a 50s club in there, and Mitchie bought him out. So she had a 400-seater there, and Rodney Dangerfield would appear there and get the door. Jackie Mason would get the door. If they charged $30 at the door, 400 seats, they made themselves $12,000 for the night, something like that. And she took the drinks and liquor, So it was over 400 seats. So, but that was for those people. When I came off the road one time, I signed up and they said, I walked into the original and I said, "Oh, Tom, you're in the main room." I said, "I'm in the main room." They said, "Yeah." I said, "Well, I go over to the main room," and on stage was David Letterman, Jay Leno, Elaine Boozler, Robin Williams, and me, and Jay Leno. That was a night, and I'm on stage and I'm thinking, wow, I feel like I'm back in Vegas in this big room, but I didn't think much of it. And afterward, everybody would go over to a restaurant called Cantor's, and all the comics would hang out. As you know, comics love to hang out till the wee hours of the morning. But so they were telling stories and everything. And in comes Jay Leno, and he's saying, "Man, this is bullshit. This is bullshit." He said, "We filled that room. Maybe it took 5 of us, but we filled that room as much as any headliner done, and we get nothing. This is bullshit. We should be getting paid." Now they start talking about, I'm making money. By the time I'm making 6 figures a year, I'm doing great. But they're my friends, and I'm listening to them. And they decide they're going to have a meeting about a strike. So not about a strike. They weren't talking about meeting about getting paid. So they go to the meeting, and I go to the meeting because they're my friends. I was home off the road, and all they did, they were arguing and going back and forth. And it was so, if you've ever been in a room with 120 comedians, it was madness, But all they decided at that meeting was they were going to have another meeting. So I go to the second meeting, and it's just as bad. They're all talking. And finally, I had been in the JCs. That's how I met Tim Reid. I was in the Junior Chamber of Commerce. I knew how to conduct a meeting. I knew Robert's Rules of Order and how to chair a meeting. So I got up and I started chairing the meeting. I said, let me get this organized. And I started chairing the meeting. Okay, hold your point. Hold on, Gallagher. Hold on. Jay Leno, Jay, take the floor. Jay, make your point. Okay, let's put that in the form of a motion. And I started organizing them. When you organize those young, brilliant minds, they were a force to be reckoned with. They got organized, and I finally went to Mitzi and I told her the comedians want to get paid. And there was under no circumstances was she ever going to pay the comedians. I begged her, I talked to her, I told her why. One night I went over to her home with Paul Mooney, with George Miller and Tim Thomerson, and we stayed up there for like 6 hours and could not convince her to pay the comedians. Wow. I finally went to her one night. I couldn't sleep all night long, and I woke up in the middle of the night. I had this idea. I went to her office in the morning. I said, "Mitzi, I got it. You're charging $5 at the door. Charge $6 at the door. Let the comedians have that $1. If 200 people show up, they split $200. If 500 people, they split $500. If 50 people, the comedians of the night split $50. She said, "No, they don't deserve to be paid. They're not ready to be paid." Now that's when I was numb, because I thought it was about money. If it was about money, we could resolve this issue. It was about control. When you pay the slave isn't a slave anymore. But that's a terrible analogy. But my point was that I was numb. Now I realized I went back and told the community, she's not going to pay. They decided they wanted to go on strike. The last thing I want to do is get involved in a strike. I had $50,000 of work coming up just with Sammy Davis Jr. with about 5 or 6 dates that I was going out on the road with them. Anyhow, long story short, they voted on it. I called Mitzi one more time. I said, "Please, Mitzi, the comedians want to go on strike. Would you mind paying them? Can I swear on this show?"
Yes, sir. Say whatever you want.
Okay, well, this is her answer. There were all the people at my house. She said, "Not one red fucking cent." So I said to the comedians, I said, "Mitzi's not going to pay." And they all said, "Strike." That night they went on strike. Now, we had committees. I helped set up committees. Steve Bluestein was in charge of publicity. He got all ABC, NBC, CBS. He got everybody out there, all on that night of the strike, and it became news coast to coast, worldwide, in England and all over wherever there was comedy rooms. This place, Now I became like Jimmy Hoffa. I really didn't want to do this. And now they voted. The comedian said we should not have all the comedians talking to the media. It will discombobulate our issue. Let's vote for one person. And Dottie Archibald said, I'll let Tom Dreesen do it. I was more like the senior comedian, so I became the spokesperson for them. I thought it would be over, and it would have been over in 24 hours if all the comedians stayed united. 18 comedians, most of the comedians stayed united. 18 comedians, 18 guys and one girl, 19 people crossed the picket line. And because they weren't big names at the time or anything, but when they crossed the picket line, they kept the place open. Had they not done that, it would have been over in 24 hours. But it lasted 8 weeks, and it got ugly, and arguments and fights, and it just really got ugly. And after about 8 weeks, I had just about had it. I turned down all the work with Sammy, and I told Sammy what I was doing. He said, I understand, Tom, it's the right thing to do, but don't worry, you'll have a job with me when this is over. But I'm thinking it's going to be a week or two. I didn't know it was going to last forever. And I'm going to digress for a minute. I'm a street guy. I don't have a degree from academia, but I got a doctorate from the streets. I grew up on the streets. When I got into a fight, I've been beat, but once the fight started, I want to win, and I don't quit. In sports, in every sport I ever played, basketball, football, baseball, once the game starts, I want to win. I boxed when I was in the service. Once the fight started, I wanted to win. And that's what was happening here. I wasn't going to give up. And now after about 8 weeks, Screen Actors Guild wanted me to speak to their membership and about this issue, because it was on all the papers and everything. And they asked for the Comedy Store to send over Mitzi's argument, and I would debate them. Me and a guy named Mark Lanau and his wife, Joanne. We represented our side, and a guy named Biff Maynard and Danny Mora represented the Comedy Store. So we got up to debate. And Biff Maynard, God rest his soul, a big tough guy, been in prison, but he was a comedian too. Big tough guy. But anyhow, he got up, and I'm going to try to make this short. But all during the strike, after about 4 weeks into the strike, Mitzi decided that she called me and said, "I'll pay you on weekends, on Fridays and Saturdays, but Monday through Thursday and Sunday, I don't pay anything to comedians." Well, I took that offer back to the comedians saying, I would take it. I think it's a great idea. They said, no, anytime you have a cover charge, we think you should pay the comedians anytime they perform. So I said, Mitzi, they want to be paid every time you have a cover charge. In those days, they thought cover charge meant cover the cost of entertainment, and which we found out later it didn't, but nonetheless. So now, while we were on strike, she started paying those who crossed the picket line $25 on Friday night and $25 on Saturday night. So Biff Maynard gets up, and the first thing he says to this room full of artists, actors, he said, comedians are artists, and artists don't need to be paid for their art. Well, he was talking to a room full of artists. That didn't go over very big. And then he just was going on and on about comedians shouldn't be paid. I got up and I said, we've been walking this picket line for almost 8 weeks. In the meantime, Mitzi decided to pay on weekends because of our efforts. This man that just got up here worked Friday and Saturday night, and he made $50. Do you know what he did with that $50? Tonight, he went and had dinner at a restaurant, and then he put gas in his car to drive over here and tell you that you shouldn't pay us. So it got like a standing ovation. And afterward, the president of Screen Actors Guild said to me and Biff, we're going to take a full-page ad out in Variety and the Hollywood Reporter telling everybody and actors in our guild not to go to the Comedy Store to honor that picket line because they're not paying you. I go back to the Comedy Store. Everybody's walking the picket line. And as I get out of the car, they're all saying, "Oh, what happened?" I'm telling them what Screen Actors Guild is going to do. Meanwhile, in the driveway by the Comedy Store, if you know the Comedy Store, there's a little driveway there. Mitzi had gotten an injunction that we couldn't picket across that parking, that driveway, she was right. We shouldn't be blocking the driveway. So I see Biff Maynard facing his car east, racing the engine, ram, ram, ram on Sunset Boulevard. And cars are going west, so he can't pull in there yet. And I look, and a couple of the comedians are standing in the driveway, and I holler, get out of there, get out of the driveway, get out. And I hear, car screeching, goes in, and I hear, boom. And he goes to the back of the Comedy Store, and Jay Leno's laying on the ground. And the girls start crying and screaming, he hit Jay, he hit Jay, he hit Jay. Now, I'm yelling, call an ambulance. We didn't have cell phones in those days, you know. I'd yell, call an ambulance. But at that point, guys, I am at my breaking point. I can't take it anymore. 8 weeks of this fucking bullshit, arguing about paying these comedians it's a minimal amount. I'm at my breaking point. When Biff gets out of that car, I'm going to break his fucking jaw. Now, he was nobody to fool with. He was a big, tough guy. But at that point, I had it. I just had it with all this bullshit. I kneeled down to see how Jay's doing. And he opened one eye and he winked at me. And he went back like he was out again. I said, you son of a bitch. What happened was he didn't get hit. When the car went by, he hit the car with the side of his hand as hard as he could. Boom! And he fell down. Now he's laying there like he's dead. Now, Biff comes running out of the car and everybody's saying, you hit Jay. He said, no, I didn't mean it. I didn't mean it. You're son of a... Now we hear, woo, 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 sirens coming, ambulance. Now, the ambulance comes and they're going to take Jay away, but Jay didn't want to go. He said, oh, I'm okay. I think, but they can't release you. They have to take you to a hospital. Only the hospital can release you, you know. So they haul Jay off in the ambulance, you know. A few moments later, I think it was Argus Hamilton came outside. He said, Tom, Mitzi wants to talk to you. I went inside. She said, let's settle this right now, once and for all. And we got our attorney there, a guy named Ken Browning that Dave Letterman recommended to us. It was his lawyer. And we settled it that night. And the tragedy of that is, and then I'll end this, was after about 3 weeks, the comics were all going back. I gave a farewell speech to all of them and said, I'm done. I'm finished. I wish you all the best, but I got to go back to work and everything. And we came outside. I had to catch a plane that day. My ex-wife was with me. What was her name again? Oh, yeah, Plaintiff. But I had an audition to go to. They wanted me to host a show called Real People. I didn't want to do that, but I had to meet with the guy, George Slaughter, and then I had to catch a plane. So as I'm leaving, all these comics are getting around me, talking to me, and one was Steve Lebetkin, a wonderful young comedian that who walked the picket line with us. And they're all trying to talk to me. And my wife kept saying, we got to go. You got to catch a plane. And Lebetkin said, Tommy, please don't leave the group. If you leave the group, she'll retaliate. You know, I said, no, it's in the contract. She can't do that. We put in the contract, anybody who walked the picket line, you can't retaliate against. He said, Tom, I've called in 3 weeks in a row. She won't give me any time slots. I said, Steve, she will. She'll give you time slots. Don't worry about it. And he looked so forlorn. And I said to him, Steve, my wife kept saying, we got to go. I finally grabbed him by the shoulders. I said, Steve, I won't go back till you go back. I give you my word. I won't go back till you go back. He said, all right. Now I go and I'm working in Lake Tahoe with Sammy Davis Jr. Another week goes by. Steve Lebetkin called in for times again and she turned him down. I'm ready to go on stage one night and Jay Leno calls me in my dressing room. He said, Tom, Steve Lebetkin committed suicide. He went to the top of the Continental Hyatt House and he wrote a suicide note. It was next to the Comedy Store, the Continental Hyatt House. He wrote a suicide note. My name is Steve Lebetkin. I used to work at the Comedy Store. And he jumped off the top of the building and landed on the ramp next to the Comedy Store. And of course died. And I was, Jay thought I had just gotten off stage. He didn't know I had to go on stage. That was the hardest show I ever had to do in my life that night. Because I started thinking, had I never got involved in this bullshit, this stupid bullshit about paying comedians something, had I not gotten involved, maybe that kid would still be alive. I started putting it on me, but it wasn't anybody's fault. He was forlorn, you know. I'll tell you something strange. Every year on the anniversary of his death for 2 years, everybody thought it was his girlfriend. They laid a dummy on the ramp where he landed with a sign around its neck saying, my name is Steve Lebetkin. I used to work at the Comedy Store. They did it 2 years in a row. A lot of people thought it was his girlfriend. No one knew who was doing it, you know. But in fact, there's a book written about it called I'm Dying Up Here, which is a double entendre. It's by William Littleseater. It's a double entendre because comedians, when we don't do well, you know, you say, I died last night, you know, I'm dying up here. And of course, Steve Lebetkin committed suicide. So that's all in the book. Anyhow, that was the end of that story. It's over. I never went back to the Comedy Store for over 40 years. I kept my word to Siva Beckon that I wouldn't go back. But then Mike Binder got a hold of me, one of the comics who was with us in those days. He actually crossed the picket line, but he later came back to apologize and said that he didn't do right, and he wished he would have stayed with us. He was directing and producing the Comedy Store special that I think you guys may have seen. It was 5 episodes. And so he asked me would I come back just for one show that he could film me. And I did. And I'm glad I did.